do you see any path in Israel for the achievement of the publicly stated goals of Prime Minister Netanyahu of eradicating Hamas and returning the hostages?
Not at the moment, no. I can't conceive of it, because while he's made these statements publicly, you have to go back and look at what's happened since 7 October. And since 7 October, the campaign has focused on expelling or killing the population in Gaza. I think the assumption is that whomever you kill in Gaza richly deserves it. If they happen to be members of Hamas, that's fine. If they're living there, they must be supportive of Hamas. So I think that's a secondary concern. And as far as the hostages go, I don't see any acute sensitivity to that issue. Right now, it's drive out the Arabs, and not just in Gaza. I think there's also an effort to do something very similar on the West Bank.
I emphasized in my question, and I think you understood it that way, Prime Minister Netanyahu's publicly stated goals. But might his real goal be what he once inadvertently or directly articulated to the UN, which is that Israel consists of all the land from the river to the sea?
Yes, he's briefed that to the United Nations. He supplied a map, and everybody looked at it and wondered where the Palestinians were. They were gone. So that's abundantly clear. He's also made those comments in Hebrew. So I think people need to understand this. Secondly, need to understand the Israeli population is behind it. They don't question this at all. They're 100% behind it.
Here's a clip from Al Jazeera, but it's the two, what we've been calling extremist members of his main cabinet and his war cabinet, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, making demands of him in public and before large crowds. We don't know what they say to him in private, and maybe he agrees with this. But here they are in front of crowds making demands of Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Mr. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, I'm addressing you from this stage. It's a shame to wait another 19 years to understand that Gush Katif and northern Samaria must be returned. The responsibility of brave leadership is to make courageous decisions.
We are settling our land from width to length, controlling it and fighting terror always, and bringing with God's help security to all of Israel. You know what the answer is. Without settlement, there is no security.
To length, and I think we have what you and I discussed before we went on air. I believe we have Prime Minister Netanyahu on this.
For 30 years, I am very consistent, and I'm saying something very simple. This conflict is not on the lack of a state of Palestinian, but the existence of a state, the Jewish state. Every area that we evacuate, we receive terrible terror against that. It happened in South Lebanon, in Gaza, and also Judea and Samaria, which we did it. And therefore, I clarify that in any other arrangement, in the future, the state of Israel have to control on the entire area from the river to the sea. This is what happens when you have sovereignty. This truth I say to our American friends. And I also stopped the attempt to impose on us a reality that will jeopardize us. A prime minister in Israel has to be able to say no, even to the best of friends. To say no when you need to, and to say yes when you can.
Guess he has more courage than President Biden does. He can say no to Joe Biden, but Joe Biden can't say no to him. But it's obvious what he was talking about. First, he said control from the river to the sea, which, of course, they don't have, but they're fighting to have. Then he said sovereignty from the river to the sea. Is there any question in your mind what he was talking about?
No, not at all. Remember, he and, frankly, most Israelis equate the final removal of all the Arabs that currently live in what they regard as Greater Israel. This is the sea to the Jordan River. as equating to their long-term security and survival. Remember, he said, for us, this is existential. Either all of these people have got to go and we control everything, or we're finished. He's making the argument that Israel will not survive unless it executes this operation. I think we have to take him seriously. I think the Israelis believe it. The question is not what the Israelis want or what they believe, but what do the American people want? And how do they feel? Are they comfortable with the wholesale removal of the Arab population, Muslim and Christian, from Gaza, its death or expulsion or its killing directly or indirectly through disease and starvation, or not? If they're not comfortable with that, they need to get off their rear ends and call their representatives in Washington, because no one in Washington is opposed. I shouldn't say no one. I'm sure there are a few people, but there are so few paying any attention to it. I think it's really irrelevant.
Well, Washington must know what was stated in the clips that we just ran. Washington must know that there is zero impetus for a two-state solution in the Netanyahu government, and as you indicated, among the Israeli population by an enormous percentage. So should we take seriously, or are they lying to us when Joe Biden and Tony Blinken say two-state solution, two-state solution?
No, I think they know that that's utterly unacceptable to the Israelis at this point. If there was a chance for that, it died some time ago. So it's an all or nothing proposition. Either all of the Arabs go or they don't. And in the minds of Israelis, if they're not removed, there's a permanent threat to their existence, and they cannot tolerate that.
The International Court of Justice, which did not order a ceasefire, it has no ability to enforce its order, which did not find, as a matter of fact and law, that Israel is engaged in genocide, nevertheless told Israel not to engage in genocide and to report back to it in 30 days. The latter was by 16-1, which included the justice that was sent from Israel. As you know, South Africa got to add a justice to the court. It's very unique that they can do that. And Israel got to add a justice to the court. That vote was 16-1. The other vote was 15-2. Did the ICJ ruling burst the bubble of Israel moral rectitude, or had that bubble been burst by the IDF in Gaza?
Outside of the United States and Israel and the United Kingdom, probably Australia and New Zealand, I'd say it has burst. But as far as we're concerned, it's irrelevant. The International Court of Justice is irrelevant to us. We're not signatories. We don't respect it. We have no use for it. We don't care. And remember, the entire government on Capitol Hill is, with very few exceptions, is comfortable with what the Israelis are doing. That's my point. The only way to put a stop to this is for the American people to raise their voices and say, we don't want to be party to this operation. It is inconsistent with our views of what is morally right or wrong. But it hasn't happened.
No, there's somewhat of a movement in Michigan, which has probably the largest Palestinian or Arab population base of any state in the union, but it doesn't seem to have motivated the president at all.
By the way, we should note that Americans, I think if they were asked, are equally opposed to the goals of Hamas and other like-minded organizations that want to rid the Middle East of Jews. We don't support that. We would not stand by and allow that to happen. I don't think we should stand by, do nothing, and allow this to happen. I would simply urge the president to stop lying to the American people, along with all of his colleagues, all of whom have benefited enormously from the money poured into their organizations from the lobby and Israel's agents in the United States, and simply say, if you're going to persist in this, you're going to have to do it alone. We're not going to underwrite it. We're not going to support it. I mean, I'm certainly not advocating that we should commit forces to stop it. I don't believe in that. I didn't support that in the past. I don't support it now. But we should simply say that's completely inconsistent with our views of what is morally right and wrong. And as the president, I'm telling you right now, if you persist, we will withdraw our support.
There is no clear path for the release of the hostages without a substantial ceasefire, and there is no willingness on the part of the Netanyahu government for a ceasefire. The ICJ, which is part of the United Nations, has said stop the genocide and report back. Is there any fear on the part of Washington that its senior people, Biden, Blinken, Austin, are supporting genocide?
Well, first of all, the word genocide was not used, as far as I can tell, in the final judgment of the International Criminal Court, or Court of Justice, which I think is one of the reasons that the findings were 16-1. If the word genocide had been included, there would have been more numbers of judges who would have dissented from the ultimate decision. So I have never used the word genocide. Genocide to me is on a much larger scale. Now, that doesn't mean that it will not be achieved in Gaza. I think that's a very real possibility, or for that matter, on the West Bank. But at this point, I think Israel managed to skate, if you will, in front of the International Court of Justice. And most Americans have paid little or no attention. Americans are currently focused on the southern border, what's happening down there. I think in that sense, Americans are finally beginning to wake up to something that I and others have been talking about for years. That's a good thing. But they're not too terribly concerned about the Israelis and what they do until, of course, we are drawn into war in the region. That's another matter entirely. And we're very close to that.
We'll get to that in just a moment. Is Israel no longer feared by other Middle Eastern state actors?
I think that the Middle East, its elites, certainly the governments of Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Lebanon, no doubt, they all want to avoid a regional war. They want to avoid it because they know what the damage will be to their infrastructure. They know the consequences for their populations, and I think they fear their removal. But the point is that events are moving to that precipice of removing them as it is. The populations in the region, the Muslim Arabs in particular, and the Turks, I would say, are very close to it, are so angry and so enraged. They're ready to fight, regardless of what the costs are, to destroy Israel. I think this is something everybody misses. Mr. Netanyahu, in my judgment, was wrong when he said destroying Hamas and removing the population in Gaza was an existential requirement for the state of Israel. I don't think it was. I think he could have scaled back his objectives and achieved a degree of security that could have been infinitely better than what already exists. There were things that could be done. That's gone now. He's given the final answer. It's his way or the highway. As a result, increasingly across the Middle East, everyone who's in power authorities privately saying Sykes-Picot is over. In other words, we will no longer tolerate this Israeli state. And they are moving towards a state of war across the region, which will culminate, I think, in the destruction of Israel. And I don't think we can stop it.